Hello, internets! This is Adam Brinckerhoff coming to you from SpaceUnited headquarters in Arvada, Colorado, just north of Denver, which some of you might know about if you don't live in Colorado. Chances of you knowing about Arvada are probably a little bit less. I'm here, of course, with our executive director and faceless man, Troy Dunn. Introduce yourself, Troy.
Hello, everybody.
Troy actually does have a face, but he also does not have a webcam, so we can't see his face, which is okay because we need someone to run the slides anyway, which is what he does so faithfully for our podcast. So, without any further ado, let's jump into our topic for the day, and that is how to grow food in space. So we're actually going to be talking, like we mostly often do, about how to do something both for the space world as well as for the humanitarian world, and growing food. Just like everyday life here on Earth is really important in both scenarios. The thing that's most common between space development and humanitarian development when it comes to food is that we don't have the same, I guess, ease of production and of getting it, if you will, procurement, that we do here in developed countries like the United States. So in space and in the underdeveloped world, there aren't grocery stores and refrigerators and all those sorts of things. So it's a whole new ballgame when it comes to growing and consuming food. So we'll talk about that a bit today and see what you have to say about it. So let's kick it off to the next slide. So the first thing that we wanted to cover are a few different ways to grow food in non-traditional ways. All of these techniques do not involve soil. So the idea is that you're minimizing the weight that you bring, but also you minimize sort of the lack of control you have over the environment. So the first area that we're going to talk about are containers. These are basically in reference to self-sufficient or self-contained systems that allow you to grow food right out of a box, for example. So this is actually a link to our website. I'm going to try out a new tool that I discovered on the Hangout, which is sharing a website with you. So I just shared it with you. I don't know if that'll actually work, but let's pretend that it did. But anyway, we have a partnership with a great organization called Back to the Roots, and they have a couple different products, the first of which is this mushroom farm that you see in front of you. So you literally buy this box. You can buy it online at our website to support our work as well. And it is basically mushrooms in a box, as it seems to be in the pictures, and you'll see in the video later on. So what you do is you open up the box, you spray in some water, which feeds the mushroom growth, and then that's all you need to do on a day-to-day basis, and you'll see the growth like the picture we have here to the right. Obviously, as you probably know, mushrooms are a great source of protein and have a lot of other nutrients and minerals in them for nutrition. So it's a really great way to get food that you can grow in your house and put in your meals. The other cool thing about it is, depending on the size of the farm that you get, is what they call them, the mushroom farms, you can actually get multiple harvests of mushrooms. So if you cut all of the mushrooms back to the box and then continue to water it, you'll get a bunch of additional mushroom heads, I guess is what they're called, to be able to eat over time. So check that out. Please support us by purchasing one of those through our website. We'd really appreciate it. And you can grow some mushrooms in your house. So next up we have hydroponics, and Troy will tell us a little bit more about the very slight but important differences between hydroponics, aquaponics, and aeroponics.
Yeah, so there are kind of subsets of hydroponics, but essentially a hydroponic growth is growing something without the use of soil. So the roots are exposed to the air, and that helps the plants grow faster. In the case of Omega Gardens here, they have a product out called Volksgarden, which is essentially kind of a turnstile growing area, and what you do is you can plant a seedling in this, or I think up to 80 seedlings in it, and then it slowly rotates the plants through water to water them, and then they turn upside down. And there's several great things about using this method. As I said, it doesn't use soil, so you don't have to bring that along with you if you're planting in space. But the increased oxygen from not having the soil packed around it actually makes the plants grow faster. So your yield times come down significantly, which makes it more sustainable for people living off planet. The other nice thing about this method for growing things is it allows you to grow things that normally would require pollinators. So here on Earth, bees are very important to our living systems, and they help pollinate our plants that are grown outdoors. But when you're growing things indoors, and you have something that requires pollination, you need to figure out how you're going to get that pollinated. Some people can pollinate things by hand, but obviously that takes a lot of time. But the nice thing about the Omega Gardens here is that as the plants are rotating around this circle, any pollen can just drop from the plants above to the plants below. So it's a self-pollinating system as well, which allows you to grow things that require pollination.
So just to make a quick correction, I believe you meant to refer to them as the Ferris wheel of life, which is the term that I have coined. I have not trademarked it, so I expect that to happen. And as you can see from the picture on the slide, it's a pretty accurate description, so I'd like to get a nice pat on the back for that one. And you can pat me on the back in the virtual world by continuing to use that when you talk about Volks Gardens. Again, that's the Ferris wheel of life, which I think is pretty clever. Also, Troy, I just wanted to mention the mushrooms that I talked about previously don't need a whole lot of light source, but these plants do. And so if we were in a hut or a building in the third world, or if we were up in space in an enclosed either spacecraft or like moon base, that sort of thing, talk to us about how the plants get the types of different frequencies of light that they normally would get from the sun.
Sure. Terrestrially, you'll see that indoor gardening still relies heavily on sunlight, and lots of people do this through the use of greenhouses, but the goal is to continue to use the available sun. However, that isn't always the case, and the sun isn't always readily available. So some people are turning towards systems like this that make use of an artificial light. In this case, the Volks Garden ships with a halogen light that's placed in the center there, and that's that kind of glowing tube in the middle. I've also seen some experiments done with this same product but using low power LEDs, and the benefit to using LEDs is the electricity consumption comes down significantly. They use a lot less energy, but ultimately that is one of the things you have to think about when growing indoors is electricity. The Ferris wheel of life, as it's known by many people, uses and does require that electricity to keep the wheel spinning, as well as to keep the light on. So you do have to think about energy consumption when you are growing indoors for most systems. As you mentioned, the mushroom kits don't have as high of a need for lighting. It does require some lighting after a certain stage, but there's no energy that's required to grow them in the boxes. The other nice thing about the grow kits is that while it doesn't have a quote-unquote soil that's used, it actually uses recycled coffee grounds. So you're upcycling something that normally could be just thrown into the compost, or most people just throw away their coffee grounds, but it takes a product that's essentially a waste product and turns it into something that's beneficial again. And that's, I think, one of the best things about the mushroom kits.
Yeah, you brought up a good point when you are thinking about these systems, especially in our case where we think about them in terms of space development or humanitarian development. Not only do you have to think about bringing the items there, but then you also have to think about powering them. So just like I mentioned, you can't run down to the grocery store. You aren't able to just plug into a wall socket. You have to think about where that energy is coming from, whether it's solar or wind or whatever it may be. You have to provide your own energy, and so just like any limited resource that you're producing yourself, you want to limit the use of it so that you don't have to produce as much. And it sounds like the LEDs might be the way to go, just to keep that energy cost down. All right, well, that's fascinating. And to add another element to it, we'll move on to aquaponics. So we've already talked about the lack of soil and the use of water to create the atmosphere for the plants. But one of the keys to their growth is not only the lighting, but also the nutrients that are provided in the water. So typically nutrients like the ones that you would find helping to grow in your garden or on a farm come from the soil, but since you don't have the soil, you have to provide those nutrients. In the case of hydroponics, like we mentioned before, you provide nutrient-rich water, but in the case of aquaponics, as we're seeing here on Bright Agrotech's website, they actually use a really interesting system that combines the growth of these vegetables with the growth and harvesting of fish. So specifically, they use tilapia, that particular species of fish, which you probably heard is a very common fish to be eaten, but in terms of the biological life cycle of that fish, it also provides its waste that can be easily converted into nutrients for the plants to grow from. Basically, that happens from bacteria already in the water, so it's not something that the user has to do themselves. Troy was mentioning the idea of like manual pollination as opposed to natural pollination, and in a similar case, the conversion from the fish waste to the nutrients for the plants is a natural occurrence over the course of time in the system. It also allows you to add both vegetables to your diet as well as protein from the fish, which, as you know, is an important part of a balanced diet to have different food groups and that sort of thing. So it helps with that as well. It is, like each of the categories that we've talked about, a significant step up in terms of complication of the system, just because you have a lot of different things to think about and a lot of different life forms, I guess, if you want to think about it that way, to balance and to manage and that sort of thing. But the rewards are great if you're able to do the science and engineering behind keeping it all running well. You can also see that Bright Agrotech's technology takes advantage of vertical growth as opposed to the traditional horizontal growth. So you may have seen like flower squares or gardens, like vertical gardens that people have used in tight spaces, like small apartments in the city and that sort of thing. And this is a similar technique, although instead of just for decoration, obviously these plants rather are growing food to be eaten later. So it allows for a lot more food production in a smaller amount of space, which, just like anything, is also very key when it comes to humanitarian and space development. Your structures are probably going to be quite small, and so it's important to make the most out of that space, and this is one way to do that. So we've worked with Bright Agrotech in the past. Troy has visited one of their production facilities, and we're excited to continue to get ideas from them and work with them towards ways to improve space as well as humanitarian indoor food production. All right, lastly we have Aeroponics, I believe, without looking at the slide.
Yeah.
And Troy is going to talk about that. We had hydroponics with water, nutrient-rich water. We introduced the fish as part of aquaponics. So what is the difference in an aeroponic system, Troy?
I'd love to address that. One thing I want to mention before we move on from here, though, we talked about energy usage in indoor growth systems, and one of the nice things about Bright Agrotech system here is that you can actually run uh, all of the system pretty much just off of one pump, and that includes several of these ZipGrow towers, and part of that is because they make use of gravity here on Earth to push the water through the system. So you start with a pump, but then you use the falling water and the energy there to bring the nutrients to the plant. So terrestrially, it makes a lot of sense for that reason, for the energy side of things. But as you look at the different systems, you have to take into account like how is gravity being used here on Earth, and what other things aren't available to you off planet. And I think that's one of the nice things about aeroponics as opposed to some of the other systems, and it's probably the one that NASA has done most of their research around. This product here is called a Grow Cube, and it is I think still in early production of it right now. You can see some images here. This is from 8 months ago. The gentleman that designed it, Chris, essentially has put together a system that is a high pressure system. So the nice thing about that is that it doesn't have the dependency of gravity to push the water through or so on, but instead of the like on the Volksgarten where your plants are being dipped through the nutrient rich water, or Bright Agrotech where the nutrient rich water is dripping down those vertical towers. In this system, the nutrient water is pushed into the pressurized case as a mist, and that allows coverage of the whole plant so that the nutrients can be absorbed not just from the root base but also through the leaves of the plant and the stalk as well. So those are some of the things that you look at when you look at aeroponics and essentially misting or using the air to provide the nutrients. And still there's water involved, there's nutrients involved, you have to have those components. But this one has some things that make it a little bit more viable off planet than maybe some of the other options.
Troy, do you know how they manage the distribution of the mist? So when you have a pool or a drip system, I think it's contained in either a container or like a tube. It's easier to know exactly where the moisture is and how the plants get it. So in the case of a mist, I would imagine that it would be more challenging to make sure that it's evenly distributed and you have it getting to where you need it to go. In your research on this, have you seen any commentary or explanation of how they manage that problem?
I haven't specifically. You can see from the image here, the system has a nutrient-rich mist inside of it. The pink glow is something that's very common for lighting when you're looking at indoor. These would be LED lights, and they use a combination of red spectrum and blue spectrum to get this pink hue inside of the system, and so that's pretty common for lighting. But you can see the mist inside of the case there, and it does seem to be pretty evenly distributed. One thing that's nice about the grow cubes and the system that's being developed here, and I think why it's going to have a lot of potential once it makes it to market, and it's my understanding that this should be a Kickstarter campaign sometime this year, but I believe that the grow cube developer is working with some venture capitalists right now to incubate the technology that he's developing. But essentially, one of the things that makes this nice is that there are sensors all throughout the grow cube container here, and it measures things like rot or mold potentially developing in the system, and can alert the user if there is a potential issue. what he's done is he's created what he calls food recipes with the idea that a user may want to grow a head of lettuce. They've never done it before in the system, but the recipe will kind of just tell the system how to do it. You put the plant seeds in there, and it takes care of the rest of it on its own. It knows when to water it, when to give it light, when to not give it light, because plants need a dormancy period as well to recharge their internal batteries, just like people do. And so there's a lot of smart technology around this that right now is just generally manually done by growers and farmers. So, but as to how the mist is evenly spread throughout the system, I'm not entirely sure.
All right. Well, it sounds like they're working on it and monitoring it. As you mentioned, it's nice when you can have it automated so that as someone living in space or living in a humanitarian situation, you don't have to be actively kind of pushing the process along. You can manage that and other things similar to, I don't know, cooking things in your own house or having them in the refrigerator or those sorts of things. All right, well, I think that's a really good overview for people. Obviously, give us your feedback online if there's something that you want to know about one of these particular areas or you want to know how to buy your own. 3 of the products that we mentioned are currently available for retail purchase online. The mushroom kit, the Tower Garden, and the Volks Garden. And then the Grow Cube is, we believe, coming up in the next few months, at least for a Kickstarter campaign, if not for just general retail purchase as well. So keep an eye on that. All right, so in the last few minutes of the show, we're going to quickly give a shout out to our awesome sponsors. We got AGI, Digital Globe, Space Foundation, and Uingu. AGI does awesome space-related software. They obviously also cover land, sea, and air, but we're most in love and big fans of their SDK software, which stands for Satellite Toolkit. So go check out a free version of that online. Digital Globe is the leading satellite imagery provider. We've purchased some of their imagery in the past and will continue to in the future for our Image Griffin mission. So to learn more about that, check out Image Griffin under our missions tab. The Space Foundation, we actually are looking forward to going up, or down rather, from Denver to Colorado Springs to participate in a summer program that they put on. And we'll be doing a booth in their lobby to share our organization, our humanitarian space work, and to show some of the technology that we are working on and developing. But they do a lot of different educational opportunities and conferences and consortiums and those sorts of things for the space industry, just really bringing people together. And then finally, Uingu does a lot of great work with raising money for space development. They do that through naming exoplanets and Mars craters, and in fact, they open that up to the general public. So depending on how much money you have to spare, you can buy the naming rights for a particular crater or planet for anywhere from a few bucks to in the tens and hundreds if you want something really large. And that map will not just be up online for your own pride, but will be used in the future as different organizations explore the Martian landscape as well as the exoplanets in the future as well. So go check out our sponsors. We love what they do for us, and we appreciate them, and so we hope that you do too. All right, no guests today, so we're going to jump right into asking you some questions. Now that you've learned a little bit more about indoor food and how to grow food in space and in humanitarian situations, why is indoor food rather, important to you? Do you have interest in it from a space perspective or from a humanitarian perspective rather? Or is it something completely different? Why do you think this is really cool, and how do you think it could be used to improve people's lives either here on Earth or elsewhere in the solar system? We also love to get your feedback on different ways you think it could be improved. For instance, as Troy and I were talking about, we need to think about not only how the basic system works, but then how we need to change it or tweak it in order to be able to use it in the different environments that we need to. So if we're going to take it out to Cambodia to work with one of our partners, Lightbridge International, what would be different there than would be here in the U.S. For each of those systems. So whether it's a difference in environment or just a different type of product that you can think of, or maybe a slight improvement to an existing product, we'd love to hear what you think, and we'll take it into consideration. And as we develop our own systems around these existing products, we always like to hear what you think and how we can do what we do better. And then lastly, we want to know what you're interested in growing indoors. There's a whole range of products. The mushroom kits are on the lower end of the spectrum. There's also a Back to the Roots product that we didn't mention before, which is like a miniature aquaponics system. It has a fish tank on the bottom that's about 3 gallons of water, where you put a betta fish. I have one of them, and I have a betta as well as a snail that live in there together. And then on the top, you can grow herbs in 5 pots that, as you would probably guess, since it's an aquaponics system, have just rocks in them to help support the plant growth, but no soil, because they get that from the nutrient-rich water from the fish. So you can buy those on the lower end. You can, if you're really excited about this idea or this topic and you want to spend a little more money, there are the Bright Agrotech Tower Gardens, as well as the Omega Volks Gardens that you could look into. And if you get one of those, let us know what you think. Let us know what works and what doesn't, how many mushrooms you get, what kind of herbs you are growing, what kind of harvests you're able, and what lighting source you find is the best, because we love to get that kind of data and feedback as well. So anyway, if you're watching now, you can post your answers to our Hangout page. Most people catch our podcast in the week to come, or even beyond that. So if you're listening or watching right now, but it's not Tuesday morning, then check us out on Twitter. Tweet us your answers or your questions using the hashtag SpaceUnited. And we also are looking into doing just an open Q&A session on Twitter in the coming months too, so keep an eye out for that. All right, finally, we'll just open it up for general questions that you might have for us in the last couple minutes. So same thing, tweet us at SpaceUnited.org or hashtag SpaceUnited, and we will answer those throughout the week. So anything from Twitter right now, Troy?
No, nothing from Twitter right now.
All right. Well, what is happening right now is that we are talking. So what are your thoughts on some of these questions? Do you get excited about these technologies more from a humanitarian perspective or from a space perspective? What are your thoughts?
I personally think both are very exciting. I think that growing your own food has long been a pretty cool way to make a living, and an important part of living just in general. Obviously, we need energy, and one of the things that I'm looking at right now is growing fodder indoors, and that's essentially a food for animals. We've got chickens here, and I'm looking to supplement their diet so that I don't have to look for outside sources to where they're getting their food from. Fodder can be grown pretty similar to the hydroponic system. You essentially just take a tray, you soak some seeds. 3 days later, you make sure that those seeds are getting some light, and within 5 days, you've got a patch of fodder that you can give to your chickens. And it's not just animals that can benefit from fodder systems like this, or sprouts. Things like wheatgrass that has a 23-to-1 yield, you can harvest in as little as 6 or 7 days, and so something like that has humanitarian impact, because if you need to get food to somebody and get them able to start producing their own, the yield is great. You can start with a pound of wheatgrass and get 23 pounds of usable product from that, and you can do it in as little as 6 days or so. And there's lots of things that you can plant in a fodder system as well that work indoors. Things like cereals, oats, wheatgrass is obviously a cereal also. African cereal, fonio, seems to be like a pretty good product. But then you can also have things like mung beans or broccoli, alfalfa as well. So just another thing that you can grow indoors and make use of.
All right. Well, as you can tell, we were both quite excited about this topic. We hope you are too, and give us your answers and your questions throughout the week. But we'll wrap it up here pretty much right on time, strangely enough. I guess that's what happens when we don't have a guest and we don't get really excited asking them everything that they've ever done. So with that, on behalf of Troy and the rest of Space United, thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate all that you guys do for us and by extension for the people that we serve as a nonprofit humanitarian space agency. So keep doing what you're doing, keep exploring for good, and we will see you next week. Bye, guys.